All right, so we want to build a course manager. So let's create a component that can render at least a placeholder for a course manager. Right, so what I'd like to be able to do here is in source, let's create a brand new component, or it could be right here. Let's build it right here. We'll say class course manager. So let's give it a name. Course manager is kind of boring. Let's call it I know, whiteboard. Let's call it whiteboard, as opposed to blackboard. So let's do extends, and this extends React and a component. And this is and we're going to render. We're going to return the following. It'll have maybe an H1 that says whiteboard. Okay, I hope I don't get into any legal issues. There we go. We have whiteboard. And locally, we have just this whiteboard. Make sense? Okay. All right. Let's continue. What we would like to be able to do also is apply maybe some white spacing with Bootstrap. So let's wrap this whole whiteboard with a div, right? That has maybe a class that says container fluid. Notice here that typically on plain old HTML, you would have the attribute would be class, right? And then you would provide a CSS class over here. But because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript, right? What React does is that it has an alias, which is class name, right? So if there's a keyword that collides with a JavaScript keyword, then we use an alias. In this case, it's class name. This gets mapped later on when it gets transpiled to an actual class attribute. Okay. All right. So let's see. All right. So we added a couple of white space on the left-hand side. That's good. Let's keep going. Let's create a deck of cards where each deck of card represents an individual course, right? So basically, what we want to use, let's go to Bootstrap, and Bootstrap has quite a few widgets that you can use. If we go to components and we go to cards, cards has this rendering, right, where you have an image at the top, you have maybe a title, some blurb, and then maybe a link that allows you to navigate somewhere, right? You can lay these out differently, right? It could be just a single card like that. You could have it expand the entire width of the entire page, or maybe you can remove maybe you don't want the image at the top, or maybe you can put them together one after another. Let's see, where is it? You can put them side by side in a grid, right? This is exactly what we want, right? We want to put them in a grid. So let's first create a single one, right? A single card. So let's do that. So here's whiteboard, and so let's create a course card. So class course card that extends also a component, React component, right? That render. And we're going to return a course. So this returns H2. Maybe this is a course, right? And whiteboard is basically just a whole bunch of courses. So I can now take this course card, right, and represent it multiple times. We can say course card. There it is. If I render that, notice that course has been rendered. Now, whatever it returns, that's what it gets rendered. And I can copy that over and over. I can say, take that and multiple times, and it'll just render multiple times, every time returning that H2. Make sense? Right, so whatever I return there, that's what it comes back. So what is that we want to render? We want to render something like this, right? So like a course without the image. So let's see. Let's take it from here. Let's see. Where are you? Okay, this one. Let's grab this and copy this verbatim. All right, so let's grab that, and you're welcome to use all these widgets that Bootstrap gives you. right? You're welcome to just copy it. And let's not reinvent something that's already successful. All right, so let's take that, and in the course here, instead of having this H2, I'm going to replace this with the HTML that I just copied. There we go. All right. If we go back and see the rendering, how this renders, style. Oh, okay, yeah. So style is also treated a little bit different as well. Okay, it's not a string. Instead, it needs to be an object, a JSON object. Okay. Now the curly brackets is interpreted as an expression, meaning this is an escape sequence, right? Very much like in Visual Basic or in JavaScript or in PHP. You know, in PHP, typically the escape sequence is okay. Now I don't remember. What was the PHP? Was it PHP? Well, in ASP, right, it was this sequence, right? It's called pointy bracket, and then you have a percent sign. What was it in PHP? It's a question mark. Okay, it's question mark, right? And then you end with a question mark. So every different technology has ways of escaping an escape sequence that allows you to say, hey, this is static and this is dynamic, right? It says the static part, you don't have to interpret it, right? It's just plain text, whereas this part is dynamic. So here the escape sequence is curly brackets, okay, curly brackets, and then after the curly brackets, the actual JSON object is the second set of curly brackets, right? The second set of curly brackets, and so this is a JSON object that has a name of an attribute and then the actual value of that attribute, right? So it's a JSON object, right? There it is, right? So that's no longer complaining. So there we have it. We have a card, we have a card subtitle, and some static content in there. All right. Ooh, yes, thank you. Class name. Yep. Any other class names here? Thank you. Here, here, here. All these should be class names. Any other ones? That's it, right? All right. Excellent. All right. So we have the beginnings of what these cards might look like. I think this is a little bit too big. No, on the right-hand side. 100. There we go. All right, excellent. Let's keep looking at what we could do with the Bootstrap. So we have a representation of the courses as individual cards. Let's see, what else do we want to do with? Oh, for the image. Oh, I did take the one that had the image. I should have just used this example instead of reinventing things from scratch. Let me just grab this, see if I can just grab this, and let's put it in here. I'll just replace it here. Let's see. Let's see what that renders as. Okay, that looks a little better. These are random images that are being taken from a service that displays random content. The service is picsum.photos, and you can ask for a particular size of screen. So if you go to this URL and you go there, you can ask for a random image, 300 by 200, and it just comes up with whatever image. You can also say that you want people, you want geographical locations, things of interest, art, and you can peruse through their photos. So you can visit Lorem Pixum. So instead of having Lorem random content, you can have a random image as well, right? So to see what it would look like it's a great idea. All right, excellent. So we have that. Let's continue. We have our cards, and so our white board. It's using many course cards. Let's wrap that around a card deck. A card deck, if you go to Bootstrap and you look for card decks, what card decks allows us to do is to take several cards, one after another, and put them side by side, right, from left to right. So, for instance, instead of the card taking up the entire width of the page, you can put it side by side, one after another. Right, so let's do that. Let's take a deck of cards. Let's grab that, and let's go to our whiteboard, and we can put a card deck right before it. That should be class name, and we'll put it at the end, and we'll close this, and we'll tab that a little bit. All right, let's go back to our courses. There we go. So we have maybe a little bit too many courses, one after another. But there we go. So we have a very quick, rapid prototyping of what this might look like, of what these courses might look like. Obviously, we would need some dynamic way of providing the card titles, the course titles, the description of each course, right? And when we click on more, we would navigate to that particular course. Okay. All right. So this is what it might look like. Right. Instead, we could have chosen to use lists. Right. Instead of cards, we could have chosen to do a list, and the assignment asks you to be able to toggle between two representations of the courses, either as a grid, right, or as a list or a rows of courses. So to work with lists, let's take a look at how we would render perhaps a list of modules. All right, let's take a look at that. All right, so let's create a brand new component that lists modules. So let's do that. So these are the course cards. This is a whiteboard. Let's create a module list. Let's create a brand new course component called a module list that extends React.component and renders the following. It will return a H1 module list. All right. So whiteboard here, what I'm going to do for whiteboard is that I'm going to right before the list of courses, I'm going to render a module list. And now this renders as follows. We have a whiteboard. Hey, what happened to our module list? Did I not return? Module list, return, module list. Where did it go? Module list, there it is. Why are you not rendering? Oh, what? Okay, whatever. Right, so the module list here, what we like to be able to do is list multiple modules, right? And so one way to represent that is to use Bootstrap's list component. So we can do a UL and close the UL. Notice that it's complaining. Right? What's wrong with this? Right, this is perfectly fine HTML. You have an H1, then followed by a list that have multiple line items. Well, what happens is that the return here, the specification says that this return needs to return one single element. Right? It cannot be more than one single element. So if you're going to return multiple elements like this, right, you need to wrap it inside something that can contain all of these. Right? So for instance, a whole div that can contain everything else. Make sense? All right. All right. So we have our module list, and in here we might have a list where it might list as a module 1, then in several modules, module 2, module 3, module 4. Okay, there it is, our modules 1, 2, 3, and 4. Make sense? But this might look so much better if you use Bootstrap's styling, right? So we might use the class name list think it's list group. List group. Is that any better? Okay, well, it removed the padding to the left-hand side. That's encouraging. And then we can paint all these with list group item, I believe. Yeah, there it is. Okay, notice that it wraps it around, it takes up the entire width of the page, and it looks a little more presentable. So let's apply the same class to all our modules. There they are. These are our modules 1 through 4. Everybody okay? All right. Now, as in the philosophy of representing each one of these individual pieces as components, presumably this could be a component unto itself, right? This could get pretty complex. It could have an icon on the left-hand side. It could have a delete button on the right-hand side. It could have like an edit icon. It could have maybe an input field that allows you to change the name of the module in place. So this could get fairly complex, yes? So instead of using this low-level HTML and trying to implement it here, instead we would perhaps create a separate module, a separate component, and call it the module list item that extends, again, the React.component that renders as a line item. Right, so if we grab one of these, right, this could return this, right, like that, right? And so if we have that, then we can replace each one of these. This can be replaced with the module item multiple times. Right, there it is. So it's the same exact thing. Now notice that the problem is that they all have exactly the same name, right? So presumably what we'd like to be able to do is configure, right, each one of these components. For instance, since we are using the abstraction that these components allow us to implement our very custom HTML elements, well, if we continue with that same abstraction, the way you configure an element is by providing attributes. Right, such as maybe a title, the title of this module, right, and say that, well, the title is module 1, and that the title for each one of these is different for each one. Right, so this is module 1, module 2, module 3, module 4. Right, so these components are configurable. So on this side, right, we would like to, instead of displaying this hard-coded module 1, we would like to display whatever property you're passing to us, right? This title attribute or this title property that you're passing to us, right? So the React API allows you to do just that, access whatever properties you're passing to us, right? So it does that by, again, using the escape sequence. Right? The escape sequence allows us to distinguish between literal strings, literal static content, as opposed to dynamic content that we're calculating. Right? Somehow we're calculating. So these properties are passed to the components in the following way. We first access this. This is the reference to the current instance of the component. The properties are available through a object called props, as you might imagine. Right? And then props is a map. Right? It's a map of all the properties that I might pass as a configuration properties. Right? So in this case, we would have the title property available to us. Right? And so now we have what we had originally. Notice module 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So we can configure, right? We can configure these HTML elements, right? Just like any other HTML elements, right? But internally, it has its own implementation. Okay. Everybody okay? Everybody good? All right. So let's keep going. Let's now add a series of fonts or icons that allow us to make our presentation even more compelling.